I thought I was going to have a special treat for you guys today. I read a good book, or at least I thought it was a good book. I was super sick at the beginning of this week. My voice still isn't totally normal, so bear with me. Oddly enough, I did start feeling sick while I was editing my last video about Torn, so I will 100% be blaming that book for my illness. But I was super sick, basically living in a fever dream. I read The Teacher by Freida McFadden in one night, and I loved it. I was enthralled. But now that I'm feeling better, I am doubting that it was as good as I thought it was at the time of reading it. There's a train going by. Because here's the thing. One, I was in a delirious fever dream. And two, I almost exclusively have been reading horrible, awful books. And I think that maybe, just maybe, reading a book that is like semi-decent blew my mind. I've read probably 2 times as many bad books as what I've posted. Either it's so bad I don't think I can even make it funny or entertaining, or I just don't think the book would make a good video and I have to find a new one. I have read so many more books than I have posted videos on, and they've all been garbage. So I think maybe the book was just okay, and I was just mind blown by that because that is foreign to me. And I've also exclusively been reading pretty much like dark romance books, and this one is a psychological thriller, and it was like what my typical bad book would be for the first half of the book, and then halfway through shit gets off the wall bonkers, and I don't know if I had whiplash or it was actually good, but we're gonna find out together. We're going through it. General disclaimer, this is Horrible Book Club. I make fun of books. While I did think at the time of reading this book was good, I do talk shit about books and rip them apart and make fun of them and make jokes. I also spoil every single thing about the book in my videos because I go through the entire plot. If that does not sound like your cup of tea, please feel free to go watch something else. With that out of the way, let's get into the warnings for the book The Teacher, because oh boy, there's a lot. On her website, she only includes 2 trigger warnings, grooming and schmurder, but I'm also going to include statutory R, domestic abuse, and overall very icky vibes from an authority figure to a minor. Keep those in mind. So The Teacher is a psychological thriller. The synopsis reads, Eve has a good life. She gets up each day, gets a kiss from her husband Nate, and heads off to teach math at a local high school. All is as it should be, except last year, the high school is rocked by a scandal involving a student-teacher affair with one student, Addie, at its center. But Eve knows there is far more to these ugly rumors than meets the eye. Addie can't be trusted. She lies, she hurts people, she destroys lives. At least that's what everyone says. But nobody knows the real Addie. Nobody knows the secrets that could destroy her. And Addie will do anything to keep it quiet. So our 2 main characters, Addie and Eve, we switch povs between the both of them. I'm not going to lie to you, while going back through this book to try to make my little makeshift script for a video, the first 150 to 200 pages are so incredibly mind-numbingly boring, and I don't know why I thought that the entire book was good. Nothing happens. So we're gonna speed run to get you to where we need to be for the entertaining parts. Eve is a high school math teacher. She is 30 years old. She is married to Nate, who is the high school English teacher, who is 40 years old. Addie is a high school student who is 16. Last year at high school, Addie was caught in a scandal with a teacher that kind of outcasted her from her other peers. They kind of don't tell you what actually happened until halfway through the book for some reason and just drop weird hints about it. I'm not gonna do that to you. There was a math teacher named Art at the school who took a liking to Addie, not that kind of liking. Addie is not good at math. Addie, her father had just died, we'll get back into that, and her mom could not afford a tutor for her, so Art decided to tutor Addie. He also drove her home from school sometimes after they were done tutoring when the weather was bad so she wouldn't have to walk in it, whatever, innocent relationship. He would also have Addie and her mom come over to have dinner with him and his wife, like just took her under his wing, nothing nefarious going on there. One day last year, Addie was found snooping around outside of his house, and everyone just assumed that they were sleeping together, and so he was like forced to resign from the school, and then no one liked Addie because everyone really liked this teacher. Okay. Eve and Nate are both teachers at this school. They are married. It is not a good marriage. Eve describes the marriage They are only allowed to kiss 3 times a day. They only have sexual relations on the first Saturday of every month. Nate no longer compliments her, is not interested in her, and they just kind of coexist together. Addie has a bully at the school named Kenzie. She's kind of the popular girl who everyone really likes. Kenzie has also been hanging out with this dude named Hudson. Hudson used to be Addie's best friend before everything last year happened, but it was actually something else that happened that scared him away from being friends together. We're going to circle back to Addie's dad being dead. He was alcoholic and abusive. He came home one day while Hudson and Addie were studying together in her room. He started yelling at them. Hudson started yelling at him back. Addie pushed him. They were too close to the stairs. He accidentally fell down the stairs and snapped his neck and died. Hudson wanted to call the cops. Addie did not want to call the cops. They went to Hudson's house. Her mom found her dad at the bottom of the stairs. It was assumed that he was drunk, fell down the stairs, and passed away. And Hudson is understandably shaken up from that, has not talked to Addie since then. Addie just so happens to have Eve and Nate as teachers in her day-to-day classes. Eve is her math teacher. Nate is her English teacher. She is math in the middle of the day. She has English as her very last class of the day. When she gets to English class on the first day of school, Nate is going around asking everyone what their favorite poem is, and she says hers is Annabelle Lee, and he's like, oh my god, a fellow Poe fan, and is being a little bit weird, but not really that weird yet. After the first day of school, Nate goes to do whatever Nate does, and Eve goes to a shoe store. Eve is written to be obsessed with shoes, and I do mean obsessed with shoes. She hides shoes from Nate in a big luggage thing they have in their closet, and buys copious amounts of high heels. Whatever, you do you. So after the first day of school, she goes to a shoe store and she's looking at this pair of heels and she is like, oh my god, they're so cute, I should get them. But then she looks at the price tag and she sees that they are super expensive, well outside of her price range. But instead of being a normal person and deciding that the shoes are no longer that cute, we've all been there, girl, it's okay, she decides to put them in her overly large purse and try to steal them. There's an old lady walking outside the shoe store right before Addie, and the worker forgot to take the security strip off of that old lady's shoes, so the alarms go off, and then it scares Eve so much that she puts the shoes back. But when she gets home, she's hyped up on so much adrenaline that she wants to have schmecks with her husband. He shuts her down because it's not the first Saturday of the month. Oof. Time passes. Addie's in English class. Nate is passing back some poems they had done for the class. He's giving everyone their poems face up. He gives Addie hers face down. On the poem, there is a note that says, please see me after class. Heart attack. Addie stays after class. Nate says that she didn't do anything wrong. Her poem is actually super, super good, and he wants to publish it. And it just so happens that Nate is a supervisor of a poem magazine that their school runs. Never heard of that before, but okay. And he wants her to start going to their meetings after school. Eve is at the grocery store and runs into Art, who is the teacher that Addie was caught outside the house of. Art tells her that Addie's a very troubled girl and that she needs to be very careful around her, and the scene ends and it never comes up again. Why? 3 more chapters happen, nothing really happens. The beginning of this book is very, 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 very slow. Mind you, this is all that happens, and we're on page 72 right now. Addie goes to the poem club thingy and meets a girl named Lotus. They don't become friends, but they don't hate each other. It's pretty much irrelevant. That night, Eve goes to another shoe store. A different one this time than the one that she tried to steal from. She gets there 10 minutes before close. She's sitting there contemplating getting a pair of heels, and the shoe salesman comes up and takes her shoes that she's currently wearing off of her feet and then puts the high heels on her feet and says ooh, Cinderella. Disgusting, stop it. And then they kiss. Oh my god. The shoe salesman, his name is Jay, shuts down the store and then they go have schmecks in the storeroom. Huh? So we find out that Eve has been coming to the shoe store before close for a good long while now and having schmecksful relations with this dude named Jay in the storeroom amongst the pile of shoes because that just really gets her going, I guess. Once a week even, she's going to the shoe store. Jay gets a call and Eve hears a female voice on the other side of the phone telling him that he needs to get home. A few weeks pass. Nate tells Addie that he wants to submit one of her poems to this national yearly poem competition and he can pick 1 poem per year to submit. He wants to submit hers. Lotus is mad because she's a senior and she hasn't had a poem submitted yet and she thinks that hers should be submitted, blah blah blah, high school drama. Time passes. In gym class, Kenzie takes Addie's normal clothes from her locker while they're in gym class and puts them in the shower so they get wet, so Addie has to wear her stinky gym clothes to class. Also, it's Eve's birthday and we get to see a phone call between her and her parents. Her relationship with her parents is very strained. They did not want her to marry Nate for undetermined reasons as of yet. They say happy birthday. That's the end of that. Back to Addie. She gets to English class in her smelly gym clothes, and Nate lets her go home because obviously she is having a bad day. When Addie gets home, her mom tells her that they will go out to eat to make her feel better. When Eve and Nate get home, they're going to go out to eat for Eve's birthday. I'm sure you can see where this is going. Nate and Eve argue about her buying shoes on the way to her birthday dinner and argue with each other, and they're not going to the restaurant that Eve wants to go to. They're going to the one that Nate wants to go to, blah, blah, blah. They're not having a good time. Nate sees Addie in the restaurant with her mom. Addie gets up to go to the bathroom. There's a line, so she's like waiting in the little hidden away part that the bathroom is in, and Nate walks up to her, fucking creep. He asks how she's doing after the bad day that she had and asks her what happened. She tells him what happened, but not who did it. And so he tells her, since she missed class that day, to make up for the assignment that she missed, she can write a revenge letter to the person who did it to her to make her feel better and then turn it in, and that'll be her homework. Everybody goes home. Nate rejects his wife again, and Eve hears something outside. She goes outside, but there's nothing there. The next day at school, Addie's locker is filled with shaving cream. We're on page 130 at this point. How high of a fever did I have? Eve sees her student Addie in the hallway with a locker filled with shaving cream and gets mad at her and tells her to clean it up, like, because that's how teachers act, I guess. Hudson even extends an olive branch to Addie for the first time since her dad died and offers to help her clean it up, and she says no for some reason. Nate ends up helping her. It is after school now. She's still cleaning it up. They finish cleaning it up together. It's raining outside, so he offers to drive her home. Addie daydreams about being in a relationship with her English teacher, but the car ride itself is pretty innocent. Nothing really happens. Time passes. Eve is in the storeroom of the shoe store with Jay. He gets a call from a woman and tells Eve she wants me home. The baby is ... anyway, same time next week. The next day, Addie is taking a math quiz in Eve's class and cheats off of the girl sitting in front of her. In English class later that day, Addie gets a note that she needs to go back to Eve's class. Eve caught her cheating and tells her that the following day she's going to turn her into the principal. That night at home, Nate is being really weird and kisses her for the 4th time that day, which is unheard of. And then they end up having schmexy time, even though it's not a Saturday, not the first Saturday of the month. And it's like really passionate schmexy time that they have not had in years. And immediately after they're done and they're cuddling, Nate's like, "So Addie," and brings up their fucking student. What? Eve tells him that Addie cheated. She's gonna have to tell the principal. He cuddles her and convinces her not to tell the principal. And usually she would argue, but she's like actually having a good night with her husband for once and doesn't want to ruin it. So she just agrees. This is so fucking weird. Next day, Eve tells Addie that she's going to give her a 0 on the quiz, but she's not going to turn her into the principal. Later that day, Addie goes to English class and Nate asks her how it went with Eve, and Addie puts 2 and 2 together that he helped her out. After class, she says thank you and then hugs him and then feels something hard against her leg. We start going real downhill real fast after this point. If you need to turn back, please do so. So she jumps back, sees a bulge in his pants, and he's like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry. This is unacceptable." And then he tells her about his marital problems and how horrible his wife is. "You have to know, my wife, we have nothing in common anymore. I feel nothing for her. And then I meet you and it's like I finally connect with someone for the first time in my life." Death sentence. He tells her that she should go. She says no. He tells her to close the door to the classroom that they're in. He says some bullshit like, "I'm trying to resist you," and she's like, "You don't have to," just manipulating her into thinking that it's her idea and she's the one tricking him into it. He kisses her and then he says like, "This is wrong," and makes the 16-year-old reassure him. They end up going to the old dark room that the photography club used to use, but the photography club no longer exists, so it's pretty much abandoned, and so they go in there and they make out. Then they talk, and Nate calls a 16-year-old girl his soulmate. Fucking gross. He says that she can't tell anyone and she's holding his entire life and well-being in her hands. Typical groomer talk. Then Nate goes home and he wants to have schmex with his wife again for the 2nd night in a row because he's so worked up thinking about a teenager. But Eve is in the middle of grading papers, so she tells him no. He says, "I don't get you, Eve. You're always whining that we don't have sex enough, and now that I do want it, you're pushing me off." Time and crime passes. Nate and Addie meet in the dark room basically every day. Today when they're meeting, he wrote a poem for her that I will now read to you. "Life nearly passed me by, then she, young and alive, with smooth hands and pink cheeks, showed me myself, took my breath away with cherry red lips, gave me life once again." That is the most "I'm 13 and this is very deep" bullshit I have ever read, but unfortunately he is 40 and just trying to get very deep in a 16-year-old. He tries to take off her pants. She backs up and says no, he continues to do so, and she doesn't think that she can stop him because she's 16, she's in love with him, they're soulmates, she doesn't want to make him mad. So now every day that they meet in the dark room, they are, I don't want to say having schmecks because it's not. It is statutory R. Time passes. The school intercom announces that Lotus's poem won the national competition that Nate said he was going to submit Addie's poem to, and she is like super confused because he told her that he was submitting her poem. They meet in the dark room. He gives her some bullshit explanation, and then they have crimes. It doesn't last long. And Nathaniel says that's normal when you like someone as much as he likes me. He also starts putting ideas in her head, like if my wife wasn't here, we would be able to be happy and be together all the time. The next day, Kenzie, the bully, pushes Addie's things out of her hands while she's walking the hallway, and she sees the poem that Nate wrote for her, and they have like a weird moment where she's like, oh my god, who wrote that for you? And then the scene ends. That night, Eve hears a noise outside of her door again. When she goes to investigate, she sees Addie in the fucking bushes outside of their house. What? Eve thinks that it's because Addie has a vendetta against her for being too hard on her in math class, so she takes it to the principal. Nate texts Addie before the meeting with the principal and tells her that she shouldn't have done that and to deny everything, blah blah blah. They go to the principal, they don't have any idea about her and Nate, so she just denies that she was ever outside their house to begin with in the first place. And nothing really happens. At the end of the day, Addie goes to Nate's classroom after all of these students have left to apologize and beg for his forgiveness. He tells her that they shouldn't be together for a week until things cool down, and then they kiss. Eve is outside of his classroom door looking through the window and takes a picture of them kissing. Eve decides that if she turns him in right now, it'll ruin her life, Addie's life, and Nate's life, so she decides to go for a drive with Jay to figure out what to do. By the time Nate gets home, Eve is drunk. She tells him that she knows he tries to gaslight the ever-loving fuck out of her, so she says that she has a picture, and he's like, okay, what do you want me to do so you won't turn me in? She says she wants a divorce, and he says done, with no hesitation. Goddamn. She says that she wants the house, he says done, slightly more begrudgingly than to the divorce, and she says that he needs to end it with Addie immediately. He eventually agrees to it very begrudgingly, and she says that he needs to resign as a teacher and never work in a school ever again, and that tips him over the edge. He like starts yelling at her and then leaves. Nate texts Addie and says that Eve knows and that they can never be together ever again, and that if Eve was dead, then they would be able to be together and he could keep his job. Addie sneaks out of her house and goes over to Eve's house. She's just trying to go there and talk to her and convince her that what they have isn't wrong and they're soulmates and blah blah blah. Eve is telling her that she is brainwashed and Nate is manipulating her, and Addie freaks the fuck out and smashes her over the head with a frying pan 3 times in a row until Eve is bleeding on the ground and not moving. Addie calls Nate off of Eve's phone and tells him what happened. He shows up. Nate convinces her that they need to go bury the body instead of calling the cops because Addie will get locked up for life and they wouldn't be able to be together anymore. Addie goes upstairs to find some bed sheets to wrap up Eve's body, and Eve wakes up because she wasn't dead. Nate strangles her until she stops breathing. So when Addie gets back, she's like, why are there finger marks around her throat? And Nate gaslights the fuck out of her. Then we get to part 2 of the book. Part 2 starts off from Nate's POV, which we have not had before yet in this series. It is horrendous, but it's meant to be like that because he is a 40-year-old child groomer. Obviously, it's going to be horrendous. So Nate has Eve's death oddly well thought out. He decides he's going to go on her phone and buy a train ticket to her parents' city. He puts Eve in the trunk of his car, makes Addie follow him in Eve's car to the train station to drop off her car. Addie gets in his car. They go to an old pumpkin patch that is actually no longer a pumpkin patch to bury her. Nate is no longer being nice to Addie. She's fully in this. He can ruin her life at any moment, so he like drops the act and just starts being an asshole to her. They dig a grave together in the freezing cold, and he drops just enough I love yous to like keep her there. They get the grave about 2 feet deep and decide that that's a deep enough grave. Nate says that he forgot her purse in the car, which is parked about half a mile behind them, and he needs to go get it to bury it with her to get rid of evidence, whatever. And so he goes to walk that half mile back to the car. Addie keeps digging just to make the grave a little bit bigger, and she's digging for an hour and he has yet to come back. She decides to put Eve in the grave and sees that her purse was with her the entire time. So Addie, the 16-year-old, buries Eve by herself. Addie walks back to where the car was and the car is gone. She tries to text Nate and sees that she has been blocked. With no one else to call, Addie calls Hudson. Hudson comes and picks her up. Following morning, Nate wakes up. He is just relieved as can be now that his wretched ball and chain is out of the picture. Poor wretched Addie, stuck in the middle of that pumpkin patch in the middle of the night. Truly, I hated to do it to her. I am not a monster. I do hope she made it home in one piece, although it would make my life easier if she came to a bitter end last night while trying to hitchhike with some trucker. I stared down at the phone, wondering if I should risk one last text message to her. No, I can't. I don't know who has her phone right now. I'll simply have to trust that she heeds my final words of wisdom. Deny everything. Nate goes on with his morning routine. When he opens the shower curtains, there is a pair of muddy high heels in the bathtub. At around 4 p.m. that day, Nate calls the cops to report his wife missing. He states that she was going to visit her parents, which lines up with the ticket that he bought on her phone and the car that he left at the train station. This entire chapter, reading it now when I'm not in a fever dream, is actually like, I really like it because it's from Nate's POV and he's a pretentious little shit. And he's like, oh, my acting classes will serve me well, and the detective gets there and she's having none of his shit. But Nate did not come unprepared. He tells the detective that Addie, the student, has had a vendetta against Eve and that Addie was found outside of their house one day, and pulls out the revenge letter that he had Addie write as a homework assignment and says that it was put in Eve's mailbox at the school, detailing all of the horrible things that Addie wanted to do to Kenzie, but now it's framed in this way that she left it for Eve. Nate and the detective go into the kitchen, and there is a pair of high heels in the middle of the floor covered in mud and pieces of pumpkin. The detective goes to Addie's house and questions her about her relationship with Eve. Addie is very shaken up but denies everything, says we didn't get along the greatest, but she's my teacher, it's not like I would ever do anything, but also doesn't give away Nathan. Later that night, Nate gets a package and it is a pair of muddy high heels. It occurs to me that there is one other person who could have done this, someone besides Addie or Eve's mystery lover or the ghost of my dead wife. There's one other person who knows just enough to bury me, and if that person is the one taunting me, I am in deep, deep trouble. I don't know. Following day, the detective ends up finding Addie while she's on a walk and telling her that she thinks there might be something going on between her and Nate. Addie denies it. Detective gives Addie a business card and tells her to call her if she changes her mind and wants to share anything with her. After she gets home, there is a knock on her door, and Kenzie, her bully, is at her front door wanting to talk to her. Kenzie tells Addie that she knows about her and Nate. Addie tries to deny it, but Kenzie tells her that she saw the poem and she knows it was from Nate because Nate wrote her the same poem when she was 14 years old. Kenzie tells Addie that Nate has been assaulting her since she was 14 years old and still to this day. It's basically the same story that happened to Addie. He said that they were soulmates, wrote her a poem, and then started doing crimes with her after school. Unlike Addie, Kenzie has screenshots from all of their conversations. They use an app like Snapchat. I think they call it Snap Flash or something, but Kenzie screenshotted everything. So Kenzie wants Addie to go to the police with her to report him. Addie calls the detective number that was on the card that she gave her, and her and Kenzie both very bravely tell this detective everything that happened, including what happened to Eve. Nate is driving around. He gets a call from the detective asking where he's at, saying that there was a patrol car that was trying to pick him up. Not that he was in trouble yet, just that they had some questions for him. So he goes home. When he gets home, there is a jack-o'-lantern in his kitchen, and there is a raven inside of it. And he's like, oh, nevermore. There's only one person who could have done this. It's Eve. So he leaves before the patrol car gets there and goes back out to the pumpkin patch. When he gets back to where they buried her, there's a gaping, empty hole in the ground that Eve's body is not in. And then something slams into the back of his head. Part 3 of the book, we get Eve's POV again. Eve woke up very shortly after Addie finished burying her. The bedsheet that was wrapped around her kept her from getting dirt in her mouth and suffocating. She painstakingly dug herself out of the ground, and since they buried her with her purse, she has her phone. She walks down the road until she gets a cell phone signal and calls Jay. Jay does not answer. He takes about 20 minutes to call her back, but he does come pick her up. Jay wants to call the cops. Eve says no. She wants to make Nate pay herself, and he agrees and lets her sleep in his tool shed for 2 days. They tie him up and bury him alive in the grave that he tried to bury his wife in. Hell yeah. He alternates between begging us to stop and screaming threats until the mud completely covers his face. Shortly after that, he goes blessedly silent. We keep shoveling in dirt until the hole is completely filled. And as I put the finishing touches on my husband's grave in the woods, I recite to myself the poem he once wrote for me many years ago, back when I was 15 years old and he was my English teacher, fresh out of college, who swore to me that I was his soulmate. God damn. In the epilogue, 6 months has passed. Addie and Kenzie are friends. They are both attending therapy, very thankfully, and doing much better. Addie and Hudson are friends again. Addie is going to meet Hudson after his football game. Addie explains that since Eve showed back up, even though they had her story on file about murdering her and burying her in a pumpkin patch, that they had no proof. Eve would not confirm any of this story, so they just kind of dropped it, which you would think it would make them go search the pumpkin patch and find Nate's body, but I digress. Addie is picking up Hudson from his football game. One of the football players says, "Later, Jay," and Addie asks why he called them that. Hudson says they all call each other by their last name. His last name is like Janwowski or something stupid, so they call him Jay. Hudson really does work harder than anyone else. Aside from school, he works at Simon's Shoes several days a week, and he also babysits his 1-year-old brother all the time. So Eve was having an affair with Hudson, her high school student. And it like just kind of ends there. I take it back. I don't think this book was that good. I don't think it was horrible. But I don't think it was as good as I thought it was. I think I was just delirious. Would I recommend it? Not really. Would I recommend it if you have 103-degree fever and you don't know what's happening? Absolutely. I had the time of my life reading this when I was sick. This is a different kind of video than I usually do. I usually go through the book very slowly, dissect every single little thing. I don't think I'm going to do anything like this super often where I just speed through an entire book, but if you like it, let me know. If you don't like it, also let me know. So that was The Teacher. Hi, Bubba. It's not bad. It's just, it has so many plot twists and it's trying so hard to like catch you off guard that it doesn't make sense. Like, how did Eve in her concussed state get a fucking raven into a jack-o'-lantern and put it in their kitchen? What are you talking about? And if Eve was so like thrown off and disgusted with Nate for having an affair with one of their students, why would she go and do it herself with Hudson? Unless you're trying to say that she didn't know that he was 16, but he went to the school that she taught at. He was in the same scene with her during the shaving cream scene. Like, it's not as bad as what I usually read, but it's also like not good. It was, for me at least, a very quick read and kept me entertained. I don't know. I plan on reading more from this author. If you have a book that you think is good, I would really like to make a video on a good book. Please let me know if you have one. So there is a Google form down below. You can suggest bad and good books, just whatever you want to see me make a video about. My Patreon is also below if you want to join. You get exclusive videos that YouTube will not like and did not like. And you'll also get access to a Patreon-only Discord that I'll be active in. If you like the video, like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. I appreciate you guys. I also appreciate all the love on the last video. That's insane. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I'll see you next week.